this special episode of Polistratics Live, we talk to Lieutenant Colonel Dave Hayworth. Seymour is an old friend who I've known for over a decade. He's worked in combat search and rescue, especially in the Middle East, in the CENTCOM AOR. He has successfully rescued a downed helicopter in Afghanistan during that war, and he explained to us yesterday on April 4th, just 6 hours before the operation to rescue the downed 15 Wizzo, before that was conducted, how future CSARs or combat search and rescue operations would be conducted in a more modern warfare like the one we see today in Iran. It's audio only because of it being an X-space recording. We needed to do something quite fast. This is a special edition. I hope you enjoy it. First of all, I'd like to apologize. We wanted to do this live on video, but technology did not help me and Seymour here. So we decided between either record an episode or put something out like we promised. So we're doing a space on Twitter, and hopefully everything works out here. Just a quick.
I hope it works out, Sheikh, because this is my first time. So you've got to be gentle. You need to coach me through this, but I'm ready to go.
No, I mean, you're doing fine. If you don't mind, I'll just read your bio so folks can know who you are and why you're here, if that's okay with you. First of all, a disclaimer. Seymour, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Hayworth, he's known to his friends, and I consider him a friend, as Seymour has been a close friend of mine for over a decade. Seymour is a retired Air Force pilot with over 3,000 hours in fighters. He spent most of his career flying A-10s, which have featured prominently in the news currently, if anyone noticed, maybe. He also flew the F-16s with the Thunderbirds. I didn't know that about you. This is very interesting.
There you go. Yeah, finding things out.
As an F-10 pilot, he achieved the coveted Sandy 1 qualification as the leader of search and rescue forces during combat search and rescue CSAR missions. It was in this role that you, Seymour, were awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross in 2011, if I'm not mistaken.
2011, yeah.
Yeah, for the rescue of a downed Army helicopter. Your career finished here in Doha, in Qatar, where you were the Director of Combat Operations at CENTCOM at the Combined Air Operations Center, the CAOC. And your final active duty mission and assignment was as the Head of Office of Military Cooperation at the U.S. Embassy here. So, Seymour, we want to understand right now, as we sit here on April 4th, looking at the two aircraft that were shot down, the F-15 and your old aircraft, the Warthog, the A-10. And you're retired, obviously, but you've worked search and rescue. You've actually rescued a downed military aircraft. You've worked in this area of responsibility of CENTCOM in the Middle East. What do you think is going on right now on April 4th from a doctrine perspective, operational perspective? What's going on in the operation room right now?
Well, Sheikh, thanks for having me. And I do think it's an important discussion to have. And hopefully this will be educational to some folks. So here's what's going on. And most of us have seen things on the news. Traditionally back in Vietnam days, airplanes would get shot down. People would not know for days, weeks, months what was happening. And so we're now seeing CSAR real time, on Twitter, on live streams. So what's happened is, at least as far as we can all tell from the public information that's gone out, is an airplane goes down in Iran yesterday. That's almost 6 weeks into the event, the war. It's probably the right term, although some people don't want to use that. And so airplane goes down, and as soon as that happens, really what happens is the entire force starts to realign. There's a sacred bond. When you go fly in enemy combat missions, to do that risky mission, that your brothers and sisters are going to come pick you up if something bad happens. And something bad happened yesterday. And so, an airplane, reportedly an F-15 goes down. That's 2 people, a pilot and a weapon system operator, a Wizzo. And the entire war stops because we're going to go pick up those 2 people. That's the bond we've created. And so hopefully good news, again, public reporting is that one of those aircrew members was recovered yesterday. And now the entire war is trying to find that second member. So that's what's going on right now. And we'll talk about kind of how the composite of the group is put together. But That's the situation that has happened for the last 24 hours.
Okay, so what do you think? I mean, okay, that's fine, but people need to understand also, well, how can you shoot down an F-15 Strike Eagle, which is supposed to be one of the most advanced? I don't think it's a 1984 or 1980s era 15. If you can expand on that for folks who, may be asking the question.
Well, you'd be surprised. Some of the Strike Eagles that we're flying are relatively old. The A-10 that was, either lost yesterday or shot down, depending on what version of the story we're going to take. The newest, and I mean the newest A-10 that the U.S. Air Force has in their inventory is a 1984. So we're talking about some airplanes that, there's a reason we're getting F-35s and F-22s and new airplanes. Is the Air Force does have an older fleet. But in any case, we've probably put 12 to 13,000 sorties. And that's a mission. Takeoff to landing is called a sortie. We've put 12 to 13,000 missions over Iran over the last 6 weeks. Constant presence, whether that's through intelligence surveillance, whether that's bombing campaigns, rescue platforms, just in case airplanes go down. And so, in a conflict, the bad guy, in this case, Iran, not to be pejorative, but the Iranians, they only need to get lucky one time. And it looks like they have. No telling how many times they've tried. But it could be something as simple as an AK-47 because an airplane is down low and it magically hits the engine at the wrong time. It could be an IR missile that hits onto the heat signature of the F-15 as it's flying back away. Or it could be a more complex system that the U.S. is unfamiliar with. So we don't know what's caused the problem, but it certainly has realigned both what's happening in D.C. and certainly what's happening over the skies of Iran in the last 24 hours.
I don't know if they're exotic systems or if they exist or not in a minute, but you flew an A-10 in a rescue mission in the Middle East, or was it not in the Middle East? I'm not from
Middle East, Afghanistan.
Okay. So you flew a rescue mission. You rescued a downed U.S. Army helicopter with an A-10. Now, why an A-10? Isn't it just don't they have beacons that just show where they are? And why use an A-10 that can't land? It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, or am I wrong?
Well, yeah, and again, we won't get into the specific tactics because obviously they're going on right now, but generally, so the reason A-10s have performed the search and rescue role is it's an outgrowth of the Vietnam. And really the rescue force that you build it all starts with someone's in bad guy land. And that person, male or female at this point, needs to get picked up. And so what you need a rescue vehicle. And we call that the RV. We're not really creative people. And so that RV needs to go into bad guy land where someone has just been shot down. And so what the A-10 does is it provides a bridge. It both escorts, that means escorting in a helicopter. It also can go forward of the helicopters to make sure things are set up and ready to go. And it's coordinating across a vast array of different platforms that are all working at the same time. Tankers, AWACS, intelligence assets, everything that's going into the rescue of this individual person needs to get coordinated, and it needs to be done by someone with the situational awareness of what's going on. Where are the threats? Where are the good guys? Where are the bad guys? And how does that all get sort of packaged together? And so think of the A-10 as the mission commander, putting all of the pieces together, making sure that things are lined up in the correct way for that one perfect moment where these helicopters need to go in and rescue an American or a NATO or an allied personnel and get them back home to their family. So that's the role of the A-10, and it does many different things inside of that package.
Okay, and again, I don't want to put you in a position where you're divulging any information. I want you to feel as relaxed and as free as, whatever you can answer, go ahead. If you can't, absolutely just tell me I can't do that. But a lot of questions more than answers, I must say. Well, okay. So we're not going to talk about why an A-10 or any operational specifics, but when we saw the helicopters go in there and they were shot down, helicopters are slow-moving, easy targets. Wouldn't the U.S. Air Force or Army have to deal with the threats on the ground first before a combat rescue mission, or isn't that a necessity, or not really?
Well, not necessarily. Remember the helicopters that we're using now, whether that's the HH-60s that are specifically designed for the search and rescue mission, again, leftovers from not leftovers, but a legacy of the Jolly Green Giants from Vietnam. They're specifically planning, that's their mission, is how do we navigate in and out, avoiding lines of communication, avoiding threat areas, avoiding highly concentrated areas to be able to get to that survivor. And I've seen the same videos, I believe, that you saw yesterday too, is, people popping out of cars, local police people firing AK-47s or whatever guns they happen to have at helicopters. It looks like at distances of 2 to 3 kilometers away. That's not a particularly significant threat to them. So they're navigating those lines as they go back in. But Sheikh, what you probably are not also seeing is what's on top of those helicopters. That could be A-10s, that could be additional F-15s, that could be other assets that are making sure that that path is clear. And so there is an entire rescue mission force that is going to make sure that we are doing everything we possibly can. And again, we are going in to save one person. But that helicopter, we don't want shot down either. The A-10s that are flying, we don't want shot down. The supporting F-15s or F-16s, we don't want shot down either. But we're going to go in and get that person. I mean, you're going to do the impossible to go in and pick that person up because, again, you owe it to them, you owe it to the family, and that's the bond that you've created. You're right. They are exposed. We minimize that risk as much as we can, both to the helicopters and everyone else involved. And the other side of it is they also don't want to highlight potentially where the survivor is located. So there's a lot of factors that go back in to the final pickup of the single person, which was hopefully executed successfully yesterday.
Yeah, obviously, the A-10 is supposed to be retired in a few weeks, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
It was. Of course, when I first started flying the A-10s in 1997, people told me, don't get latched onto that airplane. It's not going to be around for very long. It's still here, and my son could fly it today. So it's just got such a unique mission, Sheikh. It's relatively slow, though relatively quick when it needs to be, but it's close to the ground. I mean, you can imagine what an A-10 could do with helicopters because of that slower speed. So escorting in a helicopter would be potentially very difficult for an F-15 or an F-16 because it needs to keep a quicker pace. Where A-10s, that's an area where we could maneuver and help the helicopter without getting too far away from it. And additionally, it can get over a survivor and it can protect a survivor for a long period of time. So it's a really unique skill set. But again, people in the Pentagon need to balance. Do I keep 1984 to 2026? Do I keep those A-10s around or do I move into F-35s and try to give them that mission? So there's a lot of competing interest, but the A-10, I would say far and away as a CSAR mission, a combat search and rescue, has been a linchpin of the U.S. Air Force for the last, 30, 45 years.
Yeah, I'm guessing that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's June 1st that the A-10s were supposed to be started to phase out from service. But I think they're going to probably give it a few more months, at least, in service. So now looking beyond the immediate, you've excellently and expertly explained, what we're going through right now as much as you can as someone who's performed these CSAR missions and in an A-10 as well. What comes next? Does the folks at the Pentagon, at CENTCOM, change planning when it comes to low-level missions, dealing with exotic weaponry, handpads, things of that nature? Or does it just continue and consider this a fluke or just the normal attrition and damage that comes from military operations or wars?
Yeah, I think, the first thing that's going to happen is the aircrew that was recovered yesterday, as soon as they get back, they're going to get a full debrief. What happened? Was this enemy fire? For some reason, the F-15 just failed. That certainly is a possibility. So they have gotten a lot of information. And I say they, the CENTCOM and the folks in the U.S. have gotten a lot of information from the aircrew that was recovered. They've gotten a lot of information from the rescue force as well as how does it look? Is this an area that we can get back into? But you're exactly right. The U.S. is prosecuting an entire war across a range of areas. So while this is priority mission number one, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people inside the CAOC tonight, the mission still continues. And by continuing to prosecute the war across Iran, you also don't allow the Iranians to start going, okay, this is my priority mission one number right now too, is I want to go find this guy or gal and I want to make sure that I get the biggest political bump I can out of it. So I think I've seen the same news that you have, rewards from the parliamentarian for the capture, IRGC saying this is their number one objective. Because it is such a significant event to capture an American soldier or sailor, or Marine airman alive. So yeah, this is certainly mission one for the U.S. right now, but the rest of the war is going to continue for a host of reasons. Make sure that person stays safe and create conflict for the rest of the IRGC. But the U.S. has other missions that need to happen at the same time.
So stepping just aside and looking from a higher altitude, being a fighter pilot yourself, you can understand, and working on at the strategic level and in later in your career. What comes next for the war? I mean, right now we're looking at a possible expansion of the war, maybe boots on the ground. People will disagree. Are Marines boots on the ground? Are Special Forces boots on the ground? And then you go up the escalatory ladder of, mission creep and just going down this LBJ route of not being able to back away from, the mission or the war. Again, we shouldn't be shying from using that three-letter word because it is a war. And how do you see this being executed in the short to medium term?
Well, I would have given you probably an entirely different answer 36 hours ago. Losing an airplane and potentially losing air crew changes things. I think you're familiar with, all the stories from Vietnam, Hanoi Hilton, and what politically that did for us back in the States. Scott O'Grady, 1995, so it tells me two things. First, there were extraordinary, levels of heroism and evasion that happened. And so, like I said, the first thing that they're going to do inside at least the airplaner's perspective is we're going to be on this mission, the CSAR mission, until we find that person, or until there's absolute confirmation that the enemy has them, or God forbid that they've lost their life. So that will continue. And we've heard stories of Scott O'Grady on the ground for 6 days. The old Bat 2-1 story from Vietnam, that air crew member was on the ground in Vietnam for 11 days. So we are not going to lose faith. And that person on the ground should not lose faith that we're going to come back after them. But back to your central question, it does entirely change the landscape. We now have our first boots on the ground. That happened yesterday. American boots were on the ground, and you saw the reaction for what happens in Washington, D.C. Immediately the West Wing gets together, the entire chaos and all the forces are now dramatically energized because, oh my gosh, is this the beginning of a change in the tide? So we've already had boots on the ground. Now the question is going to be, do we have more boots on the ground? I think so. I think it's going to be, I think this is going to be a significant change. Now back to your question of, are now we going to experience the escalation? And you've been a student of history, much better than I have ever been. You've seen that escalation ladder. You've seen it in Vietnam. We've seen it in Iraq, in Afghanistan, the Israelis into Lebanon. So now it's that mission creep or escalation ladder that I think everyone is very nervous about. Do I think there'll be boots on the ground sitting here on 4 April? I don't know. I certainly hope not. But I say it's certainly trending in that direction. Isn't that what you think, Sheikh? I mean, it's trending that way. Certainly the U.S. is posturing for that, whether that's a political, beat the chest to say that we're going to do it as a negotiation tactic. But at some point that you need to pull the trigger on it, or people don't feel like that's a, realistic leverage. So whether it's bluster or, sort of a preparing the U.S. electorate that it is going to happen, both of those things are happening at the same time, but it is trending in that direction, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you asked me, what do I think? And I know I'm interviewing you, Seymour, so let's stick to that. But I'll answer you.
The world wants to know, Sheikh. The world wants to know.
No, I mean, folks know where I stand. I've written a lot about this and I've spoken a lot about this. I believe that there is no, military solution to a political question. There's only a political solution to a political question. Right now, the GCC is on the receiving end of Iranian wrath, and we've seen that being targeted civilian locations. And yes, folks will come up with imaginary reasons why that makes sense. I'm against hitting civilian targets anywhere, but definitely in our part of the world, because it's very close and personal, that makes it even that more important that this ends diplomatically and not through more escalation. History, as you've mentioned, teaches us neither you nor I, and maybe the decision makers in Washington, Tehran, and also in Tel Aviv, they may decide in the end that, well, we're forced to do something that we may view that they're not. And I think that they're not, to be honest, if we're being honest about that. But back to you, Seymour. You rescued the team, the helicopter in Afghanistan. How long did that take? Since you were leading the search and rescue team and the search and rescue mission, how long did that take? I mean, we're now at day 3, are we? I think for this downed officer, 2 days, 3 days now, right now, if we're counting hours. How long did yours take?
Yeah, so it is all measured in hours at this point because it's just you don't know what's going on. Obviously, with ejections out of airplanes, there could be injuries. The golden hour when people are need to get back to field hospitals. CSARs are typically measured in hours. I was in the cockpit of my airplane for over 10 hours, airborne, multiple refuelings over the top of the survivors. And the second version is we were already airborne. In Afghanistan, we always had search and rescue pilots available. We were on a different mission, and then as soon as the helicopter went down, we were immediately, redirected to that location, so we could assess and start to build the rescue mission. That happened at night, again because of a lot of missions that the U.S. likes to do is at night. We feel like we can control things with the high technology pieces we have. It stretched all the way into the daytime, and so the entire rescue mission probably extended about 16 to 17 hours. It involved the insertion of pararescuemen to recover the people in the helicopter itself. They then got stranded, and then we had to insert a larger force to recover them because they were surrounded by enemy forces. So all told, it was a number of F-16s, A-10s, tankers, unmanned drones providing pictures back to the KAOC. And so, yeah, it was a little less than 24 hours. And we do like to do it as quickly as we possibly can because, like I said, as the member is very likely banged up and they are alone. They're an air crew, likely with a single sidearm. Beretta 9mm is what we used to fly with. And now we have also extended into the ejection seats that will come out with the pilots, a small long gun that will give them, 200 meters or so. But they are exposed and they need to be recovered as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think a carbine, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, AR-5 is what we've done. Flexible, so you can fold up into a seat. And then it just gives you a little bit more distance. Otherwise, obviously the Beretta is very, very close.
And any comms?
Yeah. You've got quite a bit of comms. And so as you step to an airplane and a fighter today, you're probably wearing 30 or 40 pounds of gear, and then you're sitting on an ejection seat that has another set of survival gear that comes with you if you eject out of the airplane. And so on your person, even if you didn't get to the ejection seat after your escape, you've got your sidearm, you've got a minimal amount of water, you've got signaling devices, you've got radios. Attached to your ejection seat is a life raft in case you go out over water. And you go through training on all of these systems every year. You never want it to happen, but you have to be prepared for it to happen. So you have a large amount of equipment with you. And if you can get on the ground and get to your ejection seat, which again is typically fairly close, or it's connected to your leg in some situations, that's another 10 or 15 pounds of gear, a little more food, a little more water, your long gun, and some additional batteries and other pieces that are just too heavy. So you've got an immediate, hey, I just need to get on the ground and get going. And then I've got additional gear that if I have time, I'm going to collect, and then I'm going to start moving.
So you mentioned earlier that this could have been a fluke, could have been just, bad luck or good luck, depending on who's on what side of the weapon that was fired on the aircraft. What if it happens with more frequency? Do we then look at more exotic capabilities that the IRGC or the Iranians may have, or is that a bit too much imagination?
No, I think that's the exact right perspective you have. Anytime something happens, the cornerstone of at least the fighter world is debrief. Let's get feedback and let's give honest, transparent feedback to get to the core problem. But, we don't care about hurt feelings. And so I would think over the last 24 to 36 hours since this incident, all of the intel assets across the Middle East are going, have you heard anything? Do we not know about a potential threat system that we need to recalculate for? Is this a one-off? Are we hearing any chatter? Are we getting any communication that this was planned? Notionally, we would in the fighter world call this a sambush. You've got surface-to-air missiles in an ambush type scenario where you're trying to bait in U.S. forces.
That's what the IRGC is calling it, at least on the channels online.
Well, and they also called it an F-35. Trust me, you're going to look at every source. If the IRGC is saying it, again, the honesty part of it is I'm going to treat that as a piece of information until I can discount it. And you may never discount it. So there may be, new rules going out across the fleet that goes, listen, we're not going to this location. Or if we're getting reports of this, we're going to avoid it until we can confirm it. They may be changing, electronic signatures or different tactics. So yes, yesterday changed everything. Just like tomorrow, if there's an event, it will change everything too. I think that's the scale and scope that is difficult to really comprehend, is when the US goes to war, the level of resources and the decision making and the assets that are allocated to that. I mean, the public reporting is that we're spending close to $1 billion a day. That's not just on the bombs falling from the airplanes. That's all of the people aligned around the theater. That's the reach back into the US, doing support for all of the operations. It's the satellite constellations that are picking up information and feeding it back into the force. So yes, yesterday or a day and a half ago changed a lot of things, and they are going to find out very quickly what happened, hopefully.
Okay, in this, we're in a multi-domain war right now, and modern warfare is multi-domainal. Mainly, the new domains of cyber and space have taken prominence in the past few years. The United States launched, its newest arm in the armed forces, the Space Force. Now, in this new multi-domain, age of multi-domain warfare that we're in, where do you see this moving forward? Do we see more air sorties? Do we see more, cyber operation? Is it traditional kinetic phase, or would it be just a combination of all, air, land, space, and cyberspace?
I think it's going to be all of them, Sheikh. We've seen back to World War II, 8th Air Force coming into Germany and just dropping bombs and then decimating things. The Army coming back behind to clean back up, marching all the way to Berlin. I think to some degree those days have changed a little. So I think it will be multi-domain, like you mentioned. There are operations in space going on that didn't exist, 15 to 20 years ago. There are space operations being conducted against the U.S. We see them even in Doha as we're together, as the Taliban is not delivered because the GPS signal is jammed, whether that's here in Doha or from other forces. That's just
to make it clear, you said Talabat, which is a service, not Taliban,
That's
because
right.
I don't want folks being, okay, please continue.
Yeah, it's just a reality these days of everyone relies on space signals, whether that's just your GPS signal, your GPS clock to align things. And so maintaining that domain is just as important as maintaining a domain of the water and the Strait of Hormuz. And so this fight is multidimensional. I would assume that fight, probably both the space and cyber fight, started long before the bombs dropped on February 28th, preparing the battlefield and trying to move the enemy forces in a direction or protecting your information as best you can. That conditioning has been probably going on for quite some time and will continue probably after the peace accords hopefully are signed, inshallah.
Well, I got a couple of questions, and then I know there are not, folks, if anyone wants to ask a question, they could raise their hand and you could ask Seymour any question you have about the current search and rescue, combat search and rescue, or someone who's done it successfully on the ground in Afghanistan. But the last couple of questions I have is more broad about the latest news we've been hearing. The President of the United States gave the 48-hour or all hell will break loose kind of warning.
Right.
A few hours ago. Now, according to my clock, I think it's more than 48 hours. I think, he was focusing on the day, not the hour. But how do you see that going, 48 hours? Are the Iranians and the Americans talking past each other at this point when it comes to messaging? Or are they exactly talking to each other and they know what they're getting into?
At this point, it's a question of, are they talking? Peace proposals or negotiation points publicly.
Well, according to the president, I believe he said that there are negotiations.
I'm not sure
we don't know what.
I hope.
No,
so.
They don't.
I certainly hope so. Right? I mean, everyone. I'm in the GCC with you. Everyone wants this to end. From a U.S. military side, either no one wants to inflict the damage or the pain on the Iranian people either. They don't deserve it. No different than the people in Gaza and Israel, in the Middle East, in UAE. I don't want any of these people to experience the hardships they're going through today. So a quick resolution to this conflict is in everyone's best interest. Now, again, is this bluster? 48 hours. The deadline has come, I believe, twice now, Sheikh, and it's been delayed. Now I'm going to give you a little more time. I'm going to give you a few more options. So at some point, the deadline is going to come. And then the question becomes, is the president and his national security team willing to move, as you say, up the escalation ladder? If all hell breaks loose, what does that look like? Now, we've gone through almost 6 weeks of targeting very significant, whether that's IRGC or Iranian armed forces target locations. I think they did a masterful job at the beginning of getting rid of the radar sites, the communication centers. Then there was a lot of hunting for the ballistic missile capabilities, obviously the Iranian nuclear production facilities, difficult to get to, but struck. And so, as a planner, having been in the chaos, we're ready to strike Iran. This is not a war that has not been considered for the last 47 years. And in the U.S. military, as you know, Sheikh, you've seen Tampa, you've seen everywhere else. We plan everything. We're planning events, and just in case Atlantis comes back up from the sea, and how we would defend against that. That's just what we do. But after 6 weeks, the prepared target list is getting thinner, because they've been prosecuted fairly well. So now you'll, again, collect the intelligence. We struck this site. Is there any indications that site is back up and running? We didn't strike it completely. We didn't eliminate the threat that we were hoping to. Then you go back to restrike. But in some cases, that's happened as well. So I'm curious as to what the all hell's going to break loose target set is. We saw the bridge yesterday in Iran go down. I guess there are more bridges, but I certainly don't want them to go after, personally, I don't want them to go after civilian infrastructure, just like I don't want the Iranians to go after the GCC civilian infrastructure. Desalination plants, hospitals, schools, civilian locations. I mean, we have all heard the briefings, and we all have signed up to the law of armed conflict. Those aren't targets we should be hitting. We should and could hit legitimate military targets, but that's where we need to draw the line.
Yeah, the civilian locations anywhere shouldn't be hitting. I mean, I think the U.S. Has a lot of responsibility here. The Iranians, the IRGC have abdicated their responsibility, I guess. And I think if chaos happens on all sides, civilians on all sides will be victims of it.
I think so. Let me interject there too, because I think to some degree it circles back to the very beginning of our conversation about search and rescue. Is, we experienced this, during Vietnam. American prisoners, John McCain, Admiral Stockdale, shot down and tortured. No doubt about it. We knew it was happening at the time, but that's not something the U.S. went back and did. Then during the post 9/11 days, the CIA operations that went into enhanced interrogation techniques, we can't lose the moral high ground. And it's not an ivory tower that we sit on to go, oh, you can't do that. We would never do that. It's so you can maintain that civility, so that when your folks are shot down in Iran, that there's at least the hope that everyone's going to maintain all of those international standards, just the sheer humanity that needs to happen, so that we can reach a diplomatic solution at the end. We all remember Mogadishu in 1993, Mike Durant captured, beat up in a fairly good way. You have to protect prisoners. We have to protect prisoners. You have to protect civilian infrastructure. We have to protect civilian infrastructure. There's just a level of humanity that needs to be maintained there. And in doing so, then you preserve the option for a diplomatic solution at the end. So now we start striking, desalination plants or hospitals, God forbid. And I'm not saying that the U.S. is going to do that. What does that leave the enemy a chance to do? So in all wars, you have to leave an avenue for an out. If you just back someone into a corner and continue to pummel them, they've got nothing left. So I think you've got to give some people outs, but you have to maintain the core level of humanity. And to us, that's the law of armed conflict in the Geneva Convention.
Well, that's the hope. And obviously, I'll go a bit further in saying that there is no point in executing this war. I believe that, heading to negotiations, heading to, resolution of this conflict is the only way this ends without more loss of life, unfortunately. Anyway, we've got a couple of hands up. So I know we're running out of time. I apologize, Seymour. I've kept you more than you've agreed to. I've hijacked you.
CSAR missions go long, Sheikh.
Okay. So Justin Russell, let's see if I can operate this correctly and let you in. I'm not sure exactly. Yep. Well, this is my first time doing it. So JT, go ahead. I think you're connecting. I don't know if you're connected or not. Okay, let's let in. Okay, go ahead. I can't hear anything. Can you hear Seymour?
No, I've got some background noise, but that's about it.
Yeah, I can't. I can't just. Can you hear anyone, Dave? I
Just the
can't.
two of us.
Okay, let's go to Ali, and I don't know if I pressed anything wrong or anything. Let's go to. Let's let in Ali, and hopefully this works. Ali, go ahead.
Well, Dave, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for doing this, Nawal. I think Qatar's played this role many times, and you represent the good part of the world. So, just a bit of an observation. Coming from Pakistan, we are in the middle of it, right? Pakistan has been trying to, there was a. I personally know JD Vance was almost here in Pakistan, but apparently it was the Iranians which backed out because what we understand from Pakistan's perspective is that understanding there is still issues with between the IRCG and the political government. They're not on the same page. Just a quick observation before I close, just 30 seconds. Of course, my observation, understanding this part of the reason is that, of course, Iranians and had this leverage, and without discounting, of course, the American, war on and the Israeli war on Iran, Iranians had this leverage. I think that leverage has been lost, or they're losing it every day. Trump has given a 48 hours ultimatum. I think if this goes
If you
through,
could
and
ask your question, please, because I don't want to keep
yeah.
wasting my time.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Dave, what happens after 48 hours, and what is the plan? What is a win for the United States? What is a win for Israel? And are they on the same page?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks,
Thank
Ali. Yeah,
you.
that's great. So here's my prediction. I don't own crystal balls, but here's what I think is going to happen is I think in the next 48 hours, right at the deadline, at the back end of the weekend, President Trump will announce that there have been agreements between the United States and Iran. There will be some future discussions that will happen in the near term, and that deadline will get extended. I do think there probably will be discussions in Pakistan. I don't know at what level, though. I don't think that they're going to bring JD Vance out until they're much further along. So I would expect a lower level delegation, either the U.S. Embassy there or Steve Witkoff, potentially Jared Kushner. So I think there'll be some discussions there, but I think the deadline is going to get extended because I don't think anyone wants to move in that direction. The only thing I think that could potentially change that is maybe some changes in the Hormuz, or if the straits near Yemen are closed, that could create some conflict there. So I think deadline gets extended until next week, and there are discussions in Islamabad that are widely reported to make it look like it wasn't just another kick the can down the road.
Justin, we'll give you one more chance.
Can you hear me?
Yep, got you, Justin.
Hello?
Yep.
Good. First of all, Colonel, a great honor to talk to you. You are the first recipient of the DFC I've talked to, so congratulations and thank you for all you've done. But during your speech, or during your talk, you mentioned two key things that I'd like to bring up. Number one, operationally. We're seeing with the A-10 an extension of life cycle, and we're seeing that with a lot of other military assets. Is that viable for an operation like this, that we just arbitrarily say we're going to increase the life cycle? Is that operationally feasible, and is it safe for the operators? Number one. And number two, you brought up intelligence. When you do a CSAR, the intelligence is key. I've been under the opinion that we are a distinct lack of humans, that we are so dependent on signal intelligence and not human intelligence. Is that a problem for CSAR and for the larger combat operation?
Two great questions, Justin. So first, onto the operational question of extending the A-10. It is absolutely very safe. They wouldn't be here if they weren't, and they certainly wouldn't be putting them back into combat. I think really the reason the A-10 is going away is not a lack of functionality or the airplane is falling apart. It's a budgetary consideration, right? The U.S. Air Force budget, as big as it is, they do have trade-offs. And to get more F-35s, you need to retire old platforms that are expensive to operate. And while the A-10's per hour flying cost is still relatively low, it takes a lot to, staff an entire new airplane. So by divesting out of the A-10, by divesting out of the KC-135, it frees up resources, primarily dollars and people, to flow to new high-tech systems that the Air Force is interested in going to. So very safe. It could extend another year. It could probably extend another 2 years. It would just be a budget question of what do they do to make sure that lifespan is maintained. Back to the second question, in terms of intelligence, it's going to take all of them. I won't go into specifically what I think we have in Iran in terms of human or SIGINT capabilities, but I would say the CSAR package force, once you identify the location of where the survivor is located at, a range of intelligence assets are going to be dedicated your way. Signals intelligence, electronic, any human sources. But I would think the human would be relatively low on the priority chain. In theory, you're talking to the member on the ground, or you're at least communicating with them in some way. They're going to be your best source. And then I would expect probably an unmanned platform to be parked over the top or near them to try to get a fix on that location before even an A-10 gets there. So you've got a lot of really good information about the close area, what I would call kind of the football field around the survivor. And then the intelligence is just going to build an onion out from that. What's the best way to bring in the helicopter? What's the approach? What's the wind direction? What's the sound going to travel through? Are we going through canyons? Are we in a valley? Is it going to be night? Is there a thermal layer that's going to highlight an IR signature? It's amazing the amount of information that goes into, we're coming from the West. So it's not quite, a pickup game as much as a very complex, chaotic orchestra being thrown together and then trusting that the training that's happened over the last 20 years is going to come together for hopefully a perfect mission.
Okay.
Thank you, Colonel.
Absolutely, buddy.
Thank you, Justin. I think Talal, Sada, if you want to ask your question, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Sheikh Nawaf, and welcome, CSAR.
Shukran.
Just a short question. How would you assess the level of harmony between the Trump administration and the Pentagon?
To law, you're looking to get me in trouble. No, I think
That's the best kind of question.
That's right.
The one that gets you in trouble sooner.
That's a great question, and hopefully one from 8,000 miles away. I actually think it's okay. I think the communication between the two entities is important. The military command center that exists in the White House is giving information to President Trump, but to some degree, I think he's left a lot of the details back over to Raising Cane, the chairman, and to Pete Hegseth. And I think those decisions are being delegated back down to the field commanders. So I think there's good news. I have seen public reporting. I don't know with any level of specificity that Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, has requested that the staff be a little more forthcoming with some of the bad news. I think no one would be surprised to hear that Trump doesn't like getting bad news, and he loves to hear great news. So we all know in wars, there's a lot of bad news. And so I think making sure that we understand 6 weeks into this, that there are problems. Forces have now been here for 40 or 45 days, probably 60 days by the time they were here ahead of time and then conducting the missions. We're running low on supplies. People are getting tired. The enemy is coming up with new and creative solutions because, unlike just going in and training, the enemy gets a decision here. They get a vote of whether they shoot back. They get a vote as to whether or not they try to set up an ambush. And so it's this constant cat and mouse back and forth. We try one thing, they do something else. Is that a reaction to us or just something that's changed? So the core to your question is, I hope it's good information. I think they're connected. It's just a question of passing on all of the information that he needs to make a political decision. I hope he's getting that information. I think to some degree he is. And hopefully with that news, a diplomatic solution will come very soon. Inshallah.
Okay, thank you.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Talal and Justin and the previous speaker as well. Dave Seymour, my friend, thank you very much. You've been very generous. U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, retired Dave Seymour Hayworth. Thank you for your insight and experience, and hopefully we can talk together, and next time the gremlins don't get our podcast and we could actually get it. We've tried, for anyone listening we tried for 20 minutes to get that thing, and I've done it for a few times now, and for some reason, for the life of me, I don't know what button I pressed that ruined everything, but I promise we'll have you on camera, inshallah, soon.
Well, Sheikh,
thank you very
much. My
much.
picture is as good as I look, and so everyone will be very surprised when they see me live, but no, it was a really pleasure. Thanks for everyone who's listened and is going to listen. Fingers crossed, the second crew member is successfully recovered very, very soon. There'll be a victory cigar, when that happens. And then the rest of the story is when that person is recovered, hopefully this crisis ends soon, for everyone. And so we can get back to the peace and security that the Middle East is so desperate for and the whole world is. We open the straits and everything returns back to how it was. Because that's what people deserve, and hopefully that's the end state here. But Sheikh, thanks so much for having me, and wish you and the family all the best.
Thank you. Seymour, thank you everyone here, and hopefully we'll leave this up recorded if I don't manage to ruin this as well and press the wrong button, but hopefully we'll have it up. And thank you everyone, and from Doha, have a good night.
شكرا. مع السلامة.